There's quite a lot of characters in the Owl House, and with this many characters that have access to magical abilities, there's bound to be some that stand above the others strength-wise, whether that be physically, magically, mentally, or a mixture of all three. So today I'm going to be talking about the top 10 strongest characters in the Owl House. I'm going to be basing this list off of how these characters worked by the end of the story instead of using versions of them that can't exist anymore, instead of using versions of them from previous seasons, because there's characters like Ida and Lilith who used to be super strong, but haven't had their peak magical ability for the majority of the series now, so it's weird. But anywho, let's just jump right in. For the number 10 spot, we have Gus Porter. Gus is an illusion magic specialist. For a while, his bread and butter was to make clones of himself, which can be used as a good way to confuse his opponents. This being evident even in the series finale when he reunited with his father while using the clone technique. His own dad had trouble knowing which one the real Gus was. However, as more time progressed, Gus of course got stronger and more consistent with his magic. By season 2, he was able to completely change the environments around people in a set area to defeat them mentally rather than physically. He used this technique to scare off Bria and her Glandis friends from the Galderstones. Gus did have little help, but they were still outnumbered against witches using Galderstone enhanced spells, so that's pretty impressive. But what I believe to be Gus's most impressive feats are everything he accomplished in Labyrinth Runners, covering the entire Hexside school in a giant illusion that even had Illusion Come and had Adrian Gray confused. The two of them eventually having a confrontation where Gus would use a glowing-eyed illusion technique that essentially worked as a personal trauma bubble, being powerful enough to completely invalidate Gray and 2 Emperor Coven scouts. I will never get over how such a young kid was able to diff a Coven head this hard. Coming in at number 9, we have Amity Blade. Amity is one of the most skilled abomination magic users amongst the kids in her age group, if not the most skilled at that age range. She started off just being able to conjure sentient abominations to fight for her, but her abilities began to evolve in very creative ways, whether it be using goo to shield herself, make a skateboard, a spear, or a gauntlet. It really felt like the possibilities were limitless. She was able to hold her own against Hunter pretty well while adapting to his unorthodox fighting style very quickly. She's had no problem taking on Emperor Coven scouts in one-on-ones or even 1v2 scenarios, and was on the verge of winning the Bonesboro Brawl against a full group of mostly grown adult witches. She's pretty strong mentally as well, as shown when she was the first of Luz's friend group to break free from the Collector's puppet spell. Just a solid character all around in terms of power. For number 8, we have Amity's father, Alador. Although Alador hasn't been shown doing magic all that much, the times he has shown what he can do have been very impressive. This guy was pre-shown to be strong narratively due to being a former Bonesboro Brawl champion, hence why Amity wanted to do it in the first place. But the way he pulled up to the brawl at the end, swinging his meat around like that, had everybody shocked. Teleporting there using a giant heap of abomination goo, then proceeding to low diff Warden Wrath super casually to get him to back off Amity. Later on, he was holding off Wrath's monster fusion form on his own, while simultaneously trying to keep his kids away from the fight with force. Yeah, eventually Amity had to step in and help finish the job, but Alador was still multitasking like that on his own in a very high-stress situation. Then there's his glowing eye moment where he proceeded to smash a bunch of Abomaton soldiers at once using giant abomination fists from his gourd. Number 7 is going to be reserved for Terra Snapdragon, the head of the Plant Coven. At this point, she's been on screen even less than Alador has, but the little she has done is pretty impressive. Being able to subdue Kikimora and her giant hand dragon with zero difficulty, and this being hardly difficult for her is further backed up by the fact that how small her spell circles were during the sequence. It's been flat out stated that the bigger the spell circle is, the more powerful a spell will be. So the fact that Terra was able to do that without tapping into her full potential is crazy. Her plants also have shape-shifting properties similar to abominations that can be used in drinks to hypnotize others and teleport her and other beings long distances. I know I'm kind of using the argument of her potential being greater than what we saw, and I usually don't like doing that when it comes to trying to scale something based on what they've actually done on screen, but I feel like for this instance, with the context of how the spell circles work combined with her being a Coven head, a witch that's supposed to be notably strong, I think it's okay here. Coming in at number 6 is Willow Park, the most notable plant magic user in the entire show. I've sung the praises of Willow quite a bit already, to be honest. She can pretty much do everything Terra has shown on screen and then some. She covered all of Hexside with giant plants all the way back in season 1, has taken down Emperor Coven scouts with ease several times, used her leadership skills to take down another group of witches in Flyer Derby, the opposing team being led by the Abomination Professor of Hexside, by the way. She fought pretty evenly with an Abomatron-powered Kikimora, held down Belos in his monster form by herself for longer than Amity held down his head, and trapped both Hunter and Gus in a sea of plants for a decent period of time. I could say a bit more about Willow here, but I think think I've sung her praises enough in my hypothetical versus scenario video between her and Amity. Feel free to check that out if you want to. For the number 5 spot, I got Rain Whispers. They are living, breathing proof that bard magic can in fact be cool. Their bard magic has quite the wide variety to it. Anybody who hears their music can have their bodies controlled. Like when they and the rest of the Bats crew made a group of Coven scouts march away from their protest against the Emperor's Coven. Their main weapon in most scenarios is a violin to play their hypnotic tunes, but this violin is also capable of creating shockwaves using the bow, or summoning miniature lightning storms like when they fake fought Ida to protect her from getting too involved in the fight against Belos. There was also another instance in Hollow Mind where a disguised Rain actually used a flute instead of their violin, where they created a smokescreen as a method of escape from Hunter's interrogation. But they don't even need to use an instrument to get magic done all the time. Just making musical sounds is enough, and they'll do this with whistling. Their whistling can create shockwaves too, negate hypnotic plant leaves and drinks, and create a giant shield big enough to cover an entire room. Granted, that last move is more used as a last resort kind of spell because Rain had to break their violin for the spell to activate. It didn't even work all the way either because Belos was still too fast, but the area it covered was still quite large. It was the entire main throne room of the Emperor's Castle. Like Amity, Rain also proved to have quite the mental fortitude in the finale, where they were able to shake off of Belos' control and their puppet spell at the same time. The only thing I can think of that could serve as an argument as to why they could be lower on this list is when they were subdued by a group of Alador's Abomaton soldiers. To their credit, they were practically working by themselves here because Lilith and Hooty can't really do a whole lot. Number 4 is going to go to Darius, the man I believe to be the strongest of the former Coven heads. Darius is capable of doing everything that Amity can do, and then some. It's kind of like a reverse effect between what we've seen with Willow and Terra. Like Alador, he can also teleport using Abomination Goo, just on a smaller scale, in the sense that he just uses enough goo to cover his whole body rather than making a giant pillar of goo for a big entrance. But something we haven't seen Alador or Amity do that Darius can do is teleport others using his abominations. This teleportation can go extremely far because he was able to send Rain's bats all the way to the conformatory from some random part of the woods. There's another power that's so far been completely unique to Darius, which is his ability to completely cover himself in what functions as Abomination's suit of armor, essentially becoming an abomination himself, but keeping the same high intelligence as his normal self and not requiring some kind of outside control to use attacks. Darius alone completely overwhelmed Willow and the entire Flyer Derby team. I know his intentions weren't to fully finish the fight, but the Hexside kids were under the impression Darius was out for blood. And yet, they didn't even properly fight back once they landed because they likely knew they were outmatched by such a strong witch. He was also holding his own against Potion Coven head Vidimir pretty easily, forcing Vidimir to go on the defensive at one point. The only reason Vidimir was sort of able to get the upper hand in the end was because the Healing Coven head Hetty was on the verge of severely or potentially fatally injuring Eberwolf. So in fear of his closest ally taking a massive hit, Darius removed his abomination armor on his own will, which allowed Vidimir to subdue him. I'm pretty confident in saying Darius would have beat Vidimir here if he and Eberwolf weren't outnumbered, 2-6, I think. Into the top 3 territory, we have the show's main protagonist, Luz Noseda. She's a weird one because at first I wasn't even going to have her on this list because if she never got the Titan form, I don't think she'd even qualify to be in the top 10, to be honest. But because this is the peak magical potential we've seen her at, it would feel weird to pretend it never really happened. Plus, she did technically get this at the end of her story, so. In order to take down Belos, Luz was given the remainder of King's dad's life force, which turned her into a human-Titan hybrid, having total control of glyph magic without having to physically draw them on a surface, and gaining access to the iconic Titan whale that King uses for attacking. Her glyph control included creating barriers around herself for defensive and mobility purposes, shockwaves that could destroy parts of Belos while simultaneously allowing nature to bloom, and enhanced physical strength. The range of these glyphs attacks were incredibly long and wide too, pretty much covering the entire area of where the Day of Unity ceremony took place, and Luz's Palisman String Bean can amplify these attacks even further by allowing Luz to make a larger than average spell circles. Her main bread and butter prior to her Titan form was elemental glyph combinations that she had to physically draw on little sticky notes, but that alone wouldn't have put her in the top 10 in my opinion. She'd be close, but not quite there, which is why I'm mainly focusing on her Titan form since that's where she was at her peak. The number 2 spot is going to the show's main antagonist, Emperor Belos. At the start of the series, I don't think I would have considered this guy on the same level as Season 1 Ida. He had some solid magic thanks to his knowledge of glyph combinations, but wasn't doing anything too crazy to warrant him in the top 2. It's his monster form that really amped his power up. Not only did he have incredible physical strength and the ability to reform his limbs into weapons the same way Darius does, but he was able to break himself apart to be in several places at once. As long as a part of him was able to move somewhere, he could, I guess, transfer his mind into that part that wanted to move while the rest got left behind. That, or he just kind of had multiple consciences at once. It's hard to say. This is how he was able to follow Luz and her friends back to Connecticut. Once there, he showed how he was able to possess other living creatures to control them. Where in the climax of Thanks to Them, he did to Hunter, where he was able to use all the same powers as his base monster form while inside Hunter. This multiple separation was taken even further in the finale when Belos was controlling Rain. He was able to leave part of himself on Rain to make them suffocate on the goo, while the other part of him made a mad dash for the Titan's heart. Once Belos successfully made contact with the heart, he was now at his most powerful form, being able to control nearly everything on the Boiling Isles, as well as having a blue fire breath attack with his Titan form. Now, anybody who came into direct contact with his new self would be absorbed by him and either die or be on the verge of death. But he lost to Luz, so why is he above her? Well, he didn't exactly lose to Luz in a 1v1 scenario, you know? Luz had to have her own Titan powers to counter Belos's, while getting help from Ida, King, and Rain so they could fend off the other parts of him. I wouldn't say him losing a 1v4 battle makes him weaker than Luz in this instance. To I'm sure not many surprise, the #1 spot goes to the Collector. The space-bound star kid who could move moons, create sorts of pocket dimensions, terraform the world around him, and to an extent, manipulate matter. No other character in the show has really came close to matching the Collector power-wise. This is a kid who's never really fought anyone super seriously either and still just kind of destroyed him. A lot of the time, he's either been sandbagging or is treating a fight like a game. He was able to control the entire Boiling Isles and all of its residents, with a few minor exceptions. Now, some may think the Collector deserves to be below Belos because of how Titan Belos can technically beat the Collector, but that kind of hard counter BS isn't really ideal for these kinds of discussions because, let's be real, I don't think even Titan Belos would have enough power to move the moon with one finger. I'm going to use an anime analogy here to maybe make it more clear. Saying Titan Belos is stronger than the Collector is the equivalent of saying Sakura from Naruto is stronger than Sasori of the Red Sand because Sasori lost the fight. It's just not a thing. I'm sorry. But yeah, the Collector is incredibly overpowered, and it's a good thing he became a good guy, because if Belos had possessed him, then I don't think anyone would have stood a chance. I think that just about covers everything. Some honorable mentions that were close to making the cut were Hunter, Eberwolf, and the respective Harpy versions of Ida and Lilith. Obviously, in the actual universe, it's possible some of the other Coven heads deserve to be in the top 10, but we simply haven't seen enough of them to properly rank them. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this list, if there's any spots you think should be moved up, down, or a character that wasn't on here that you think should be on here, just tell me. I'd love to know your thoughts as to why. Of course, if you did enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like down below and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. But for now, I will see you guys next time. Peace out, take care, bye-bye.